They called me just a secretary until they realized who really held the power. I'm Ava. And for 3 years, they barely knew I existed. That morning, I was holding the elevator door open, like always, while the executives strolled past me, laughing about something that had nothing to do with me. They barely glanced at me. I was invisible to them. "Morning, Ava," said Martha from HR, her smile the only warm thing in that cold building. Everyone else just called me the secretary. Not Ava, not Miss Taylor. Just that girl with the notepad. I sat at my desk, typing minutes from yesterday's board meeting. I wasn't even invited to speak, just told to sit, take notes, and stay out of the way. I did that well. Maybe too well. Mr. Langston, the CEO, stormed past my desk. "Coffee, Ava. Strong. Now." He didn't say please. Never did. But I smiled, got up, walked to the machine. And while the others were gossiping in the hallway or sucking up in the boardroom, I was quietly preparing something no one saw coming. Because 3 months ago, my late godfather, a man I loved more than anyone, left me something in his will. Not just something. Shares. Lots of them. In this company. And the paperwork? It all just came through last week. Finalized. Legal. But no one knew. Yet. That morning, as I handed Mr. Langston his coffee, he didn't even look up. You know, if you spent less time decorating your desk and more time working, you'd get promoted. I looked at the hand he reached out with. The same hand that once shoved a whole proposal I made into the shredder in front of the entire office said it was cute that the secretary had ideas. But I smiled. "I'll keep that in mind, sir." What I didn't say was, "You'll be needing that cute secretary very soon." At lunchtime, I walked past the cafeteria where Emily, the new hire for marketing, was crying into her salad. Another victim of Langston's cruel words. He'd mocked her accent. Said she wasn't executive material. I sat beside her. "You okay?" I asked. She wiped her eyes. "It's nothing. I worked hard to get here." "I know you did," I said, offering her a napkin. "I've seen the effort you put in." She blinked. "You're the only one who said that." And I meant it. Because even though they all treated me like furniture, I saw everything. Heard everything. Knew everything. That's the power of being invisible. You become the most informed person in the building. That evening, while the executives clinked champagne glasses in the upper lounge, I was in a quiet meeting room with my lawyer signing the final transfer papers. It was done. As of 4:45 p.m. that day, I was the majority shareholder. They just didn't know it yet. And they wouldn't until they needed me. Because the next morning, a crisis hit the company so hard, it made the stock drop overnight. And guess who was the only person who could legally authorize the solution? Me. Ava Taylor. Just the secretary. The funny thing about being underestimated is that they never see you coming. That morning, chaos hit the office like a thunderstorm. People were pacing with phones glued to their ears. The executive floor smelled like fear. The stock had dropped 17% overnight after a leaked document hinted at internal corruption, the kind that could tank a company permanently if not addressed by noon. The entire office suddenly remembered I existed. But not for the reason I expected. Langston's voice boomed across the floor. "Where the hell is Ava?" I calmly stepped out of the copy room. He spotted me like a drowning man spots land. You still have that draft from 3 months ago? The legal restructure? Bring it. Now." Everyone watched as he rushed over, grabbing my arm. "Ava, we need your help. You remember the paperwork. The one Mr. Jacobson signed before he passed." My heart almost laughed. Oh, I remembered. It was the very document that transferred control to me. And now, the only person who could approve the merger that would save the company was me. I looked him straight in the eye. "Mr. Langston, I believe we need to talk." He blinked. "Talk?" "No, there's no time for that. We need your signature now." I didn't flinch. "Then you should have said please years ago." The entire floor froze. For 3 years, I had picked up their dry cleaning, fetched their lattes, took their abuse in silence. And now? They needed my signature to keep the company from crumbling. I'm sorry, he said, stumbling over words like he hadn't used them in years. That came out wrong. We need your help. I'm asking you, Ava. I stared at him for a moment, then handed him the folder, but not before sliding in my own conditions page. This has my terms. He glanced down. What is this? A full restructure. Ethical leadership program. Immediate reinstatement of Emily and every employee bullied or demoted unfairly in the last 2 years. I want their careers fixed starting today. He laughed nervously. Ava, we don't have time for. Then the company doesn't have time for survival, I replied calmly. This is not a favor. It's a chance to make things right. His mouth opened, then closed, because deep down he knew he had no choice. The clock was ticking. The boardroom, which once only welcomed me to pour water and take notes, now had every eye fixed on me. The woman they'd mocked, overlooked, and spoken down to now had the power to approve or deny the company's lifeline. The CFO whispered, "She's bluffing." My lawyer stepped in behind me and said quietly, "She's not. The paperwork's legitimate. As of yesterday, Ms. Ava Taylor owns 51.4% of this company." Silence. Heavy, stunned, broken silence. And still, I wasn't harsh. I wasn't cruel. Because my power didn't come from making them beg. It came from knowing I could change everything and still choose to be better. Langston sat down slowly. What do you want, Ava? I want change, I said. Real change. Not for me. For the ones who've been ignored, belittled, and broken down. I want transparency. Fair wages. And a seat at the table for everyone who deserves it. The legal team began drawing up the changes immediately. My terms were signed within the hour. When it was done, Langston stood before me again, his voice softer. Why are you doing this with kindness? I looked around at the staff, the interns, the assistants, the ones who looked like they were holding back tears of relief. Because when you're in pain, the worst thing you can do is pass it on. I'm not like you. I never will be. He nodded. And for the first time in 3 years, he meant it. But I wasn't done yet. Because outside that building, there was one person who'd believed in me when no one else did. My mother. She used to tell me, you don't have to roar to lead. You just have to listen when others don't. That night, I sat beside her at our small kitchen table, placed the new company letterhead in front of her, with my name on it.
She cried.
Not because of power or wealth, but because her daughter had risen without cruelty and chosen kindness over revenge. And that was the real victory. Power shows who you are, but kindness shows who you choose to be. 3 days after that historic meeting, everything at the company began to shift. For the first time in years, there was an air of hope on the office floor, not fear. Gone were the trembling interns carrying stacks of paperwork through glass doors. Gone were the whispers of "don't speak unless spoken to" and the heavy weight of walking on eggshells around executives who didn't know your name. People were smiling, not just at me, at each other. Because they'd seen what happened when one invisible person stood up and rewrote the rules, not with revenge, but with resolve. Langston, now serving as a consultant under my direction, had adjusted. Awkwardly, yes. But sincerely. He didn't bark orders anymore. He asked. Sometimes he even said thank you, though he stumbled on the words like a man learning a new language. And the first thing I did as acting CEO? I reinstated Emily. She walked into the boardroom wearing the same blazer she had once cried into, except now she wore it like armor. The room stood for her. And when she sat across from me at the leadership table, her eyes were shining. Why me? She whispered after the meeting. Because you care, I said. Because you were brave enough to cry and brave enough to stay. I didn't promote people for their smiles or their suits. I promoted them for their integrity. Behind the scenes, I quietly reviewed every dismissal, every demotion, every transfer that smelled like corporate bullying. There were dozens. One by one, I called them back. And I didn't just hand them a job. I handed them justice. But one person didn't return my call. A woman named Carol, the former office manager. She'd left a year ago after being humiliated in front of the company by the now former COO. I found her resume buried in the archives, read her notes, saw how detailed and committed she'd been. She was smart, capable, and crushed. I tracked her down through a friend and drove to the tiny bookstore where she now worked. She blinked when she saw me.
Ava.
Hey, I smiled. Mind if we talk? We sat between shelves of old paperbacks while rain pattered against the windows. I left that place to save my sanity, she said. It broke me, Ava. I know, I said softly. But you didn't deserve that. She exhaled. Why are you here? Because I'm running it now. And I'm rewriting everything. She didn't speak for a moment. Then, her eyes glistened. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a voice, I corrected. A real seat. I want you to come back and help rebuild it from the inside. It took her 3 days to say yes. And when she did, she walked back into that office, not as an employee, but as a leader. Confident, respected, whole. The newspapers got wind of it. Secretary to CEO. They called me. But they missed the real story. It wasn't about a promotion. It was about people. About the quiet ones. The ignored. The mocked. It was about giving them space to grow. About proving that kindness wasn't weakness. It was strength with restraint. And still, even with everything changing, the past lingered. I remembered every closed-door conversation. Every time someone said, "She's just a secretary." But instead of bitterness, I felt peace. Because I hadn't crushed them to rise. I'd elevated others with me. And that's the kind of legacy that outlives any title. It was my 4th week as acting CEO, but the desk still didn't feel like mine. Not because I wasn't qualified. Not because I doubted myself. But because the chair I now sat in was once the seat from which decisions were made that hurt people, silently, carelessly, arrogantly. I didn't want to inherit that legacy. I wanted to change it. So, I did something that no one in that position had done before. I removed the glass walls around the executive floor. Literally. The offices were torn down. No more thick glass hiding important people in isolated towers. No more whispers in hushed corners. We created an open floor plan, one where leadership sat beside teams. Where hierarchy didn't mean silence. Where titles didn't mean superiority. People were stunned. And some, especially those who once reveled in their glass castles, resisted. But I sat beside them, worked beside them, ate lunch beside them. Day by day, they softened. One by one, they changed. And something else changed too.
Me.
I started walking differently. Not just with confidence, but with calm. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't chasing approval. I wasn't seeking to prove anything. I was leading from a place of purpose. But just as things were stabilizing, something unexpected happened. At 9:13 a.m. on a Wednesday, I got a call from a man whose name I hadn't heard in a long time. Mr. Jacobs. He was one of the founding partners, the same man who had once patted me on the head like a child and told me, "Ava, you're too soft for business." He was calling because a new investor, one I had never met, had been buying up shares of the company quietly, rapidly, and now held 18%. Enough to challenge votes. Enough to shake things. Who is he? I asked. Jacobs hesitated. Name's Donovan. Runs a tech firm out west. Says he wants to modernize the structure. Thinks you're moving too slowly. I sighed. Does he know what kind of company this was before I took over? Probably not, Jacobs said. And he probably doesn't care. That night, I stayed in the office late. Long after the others had gone, I sat in the conference room, lights low, eyes scanning numbers and projections. Was I being too gentle? Too patient? Or was I just not playing the same game they were? Suddenly, I wasn't the underestimated one anymore. Now I was the target. I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling of my apartment, the soft hum of the city outside reminding me that peace was fragile, and power invited new wars. The next morning, I called for a full executive meeting. Everyone was there, even Langston. I want you all to hear this from me. I began, my voice steady. A new investor has entered the game. His name is Donovan. He wants to challenge our current direction. Murmurs rippled through the room. He thinks empathy is weak. That transparency is a liability. That kindness is bad for business. I paused. I disagree. But I won't fight this war alone. If you believe in the change we've created, I need you to stand with me. Silence. Then Carol stood, followed by Emily, then Langston, then the entire room, not because I was their boss, but because I was their leader. That afternoon, we called Donovan. I invited him to the office. He arrived in a sharp gray suit, eyes scanning every detail with the cool calculation of someone used to winning. He sat across from me like he was already planning to replace me. I let him talk, and when he was done pitching his vision, I simply smiled. "You're not wrong," I said. "The old way made money, but it also broke people." He narrowed his eyes. "This is business, Ava, not therapy." "No," I said softly. "This is both. Because people are the business." I handed him a dossier, a full report of employee retention, performance, and wellness before and after the restructure. The numbers didn't lie. Productivity was up 38%. Resignations down by 54%. Revenue climbing steadily, sustainably, without burnouts or lawsuits. He flipped the pages slowly. "You're doing something rare here." "I'm doing something right," I said. "And if you want in, you play by the new rules." There was a long pause. Then a slow nod. "I'll back you," he said. "Let's see how far this goes." I exhaled. The room felt lighter. But I didn't smile because I'd won. I smiled because I'd held my ground without losing who I was. And that mattered more than any victory. 6 months had passed since I signed that paper in silence and changed the course of an entire company. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like transformation. Every corridor that once echoed with heels and hushed whispers now thrummed with open laughter, with conversations that no longer ended when the higher-ups entered the room. I saw people bloom, not because I handed them power, but because I reminded them they already had it. But even in this new version of our workplace, the shadows of the past lingered, like ghosts in corners. There were still those who struggled to believe it wasn't temporary, that the kindness wasn't a facade, that I wasn't just playing a long game of quiet revenge. And truthfully, I understood, because the world had taught them that power always comes with cruelty. I had to teach them something different, day by day. One morning, I passed an intern named Theo in the hallway. He was staring at the bulletin board, shoulders slumped. "You okay?" I asked. He flinched. "Oh, Miss Taylor, I didn't see you." I tilted my head. "That's funny. People used to say the same thing about me." He smiled nervously. "It's nothing. I didn't get the promotion to team lead. I guess I'm not loud enough." I paused, then said quietly, "Come with me." I took him up to the rooftop, a quiet spot I often used when I needed to think. "You see that building over there?" I pointed to a tall, sterile skyscraper. "That's where I worked before this." I was told my ideas were cute and my voice was soft. But you know what? What? Turns out quiet doesn't mean weak. It means focused. And when the moment comes, silence can speak louder than noise. He looked at me differently after that. He wasn't the only one. That became my mission, not just saving a company from collapse, but reshaping the way people thought leadership looked. Not polished suits and booming voices, but empathy, integrity, consistency. Still, not every day was perfect. Some people left. Some pushed back. One executive, Greg, quit in protest. He said the company had gone too soft, that it had lost its edge. I let him go without bitterness. Because he wasn't wrong, it had lost its edge. But what we gained in return was sharper, cleaner, stronger. A few weeks later, the woman he mocked, Natalie, the formerly shy financial analyst, uncovered a massive inconsistency in a vendor contract that could have cost us 6 figures. She saved the day, quietly, and everyone knew. We started calling it the Natalie effect. A ripple of quiet confidence, reshaping things from within. One night, Long after the office had emptied, I sat alone, reading through old emails, messages from years ago, memos where I was CC'd just for formality, notes where executives misspelled my name. In one thread, someone had joked, "What's Ava gonna do? Reorganize the staplers?" I didn't delete it. I archived it, because I wanted to remember what it felt like to be dismissed. Not out of spite, but so I would never become the kind of leader who did the same to someone else. A week later, we held our first official employee town hall. It wasn't staged. It wasn't rehearsed. Everyone from reception to R&D was invited to speak. They asked questions I didn't have answers to yet, and I told them that. Honestly, openly. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was respectful. And when I stepped off that small platform, I saw my mother sitting quietly in the back. She'd come unannounced. Her eyes were misty. "You stood there like your father once did," she whispered, hugging me. "But you spoke with your own voice." That moment, that one hug meant more than any title. And still, life had one more surprise left. A month later, we got a visit from the Board of National Business Ethics, an independent agency known for recognizing companies that champion workplace reform. One of the panelists, an older gentleman with silver glasses and a thick file, stood up after touring our building and said, "I've walked into thousands of offices. But this place? It doesn't just look different. It feels different."
He turned to me.
"Miss Taylor, how did you do it?" I smiled. I listened. Just that. No monologue. No speech. And they applauded. Not with thunder, but with quiet, meaningful claps, the kind that say we understand. The next day, our company was featured on national media. The secretary who rewrote the rules of business. People messaged me from all over the country, assistants, interns, night shift staff, caregivers, retail workers. People who said, "I'm just a cleaner. I'm just a file clerk. I'm just a mom returning to work." And to each one I replied, "You're not just anything. You're the foundation, the reason, the pulse." Never forget that. Today, I still walk into that building. But now, people don't look past me. They look to me. And every time someone calls me just the secretary, I smile. Because once upon a time, that's all I was. And somehow, that made all the difference.